All right, so up next is Beyond the Veil, Consciousness and Consequence. When you put the magic glasses on, you can't take them off. This talk, inspired by Dick Gregory's iconic quote, explores what to do with expanded awareness and agency. From observer to active participant, what imperatives does your insight carry? Please welcome Baba Moudou.
All right. Greetings, everybody. I'm absolutely honored to be here. I've been intending to come here for many years now, and just circumstances prevented me. But like I say, all things in serendipity, things happen when they're supposed to. So I'd like to start off by just, thank you. I'd like to start off, first off, but let's talk about what we're talking, the topic, Beyond the Veil, Consciousness and Consequence, excuse the typo. However, what we talk about Beyond the Veil, I felt it was important to talk about because in this work, I've been involved in this work for almost 3 decades now. And when I first began, it was a beautiful love affair. It was like underground, it was taboo, and it was exciting and innovating. But many of us that were active started to sense that it was soon to come that industry and commerce and media would want to become dance partners in this space. And in our observation, we began to see the erection of these various veils when it comes to the psychedelic understandings or entheogenic understandings. And it became very obvious to me that forces of society and culture wanted to play tug of war and erect a several amount of veils around this very special, sacred, ancient concept of what we call psychedelics, or what I prefer to call entheogenics. So I guess we'll start off by talking about me, so we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, who I is, and that is not a typo, that is a purposeful connotation. And the reason I say that is to open our awareness, because I don't think it's appropriate for me to say, who am I, when we contemplate on what I or who or it, I is. I say who I is because who I am speaks toward a static. Who I is speaks toward a dynamic unfoldment of who I is. So it's not a phonetic mistake, but it's a purposeful use. Who I is, because is means I'm constantly defining myself, ever expanding, ever becoming more aware of who I is. So the little about who I is, what I know and what I could share with you. I've been a psychonaut. I've been in this space for, like I say, upwards of 3 decades now. Many people, I started off, as most of us, as psychonauts, as a very avid lover of the DMT realm, of the sacred realms. And I started in a non-psychedelic setting. I started with my father, being a student of his, who was a very prominent leader of the Rosicrucians. Of course, he didn't have me do any oaths or any blood, anything, but he let me know that this ancient Kemetic science was a birthright of mine. And so from a very early age, I began to learn a lot of the spiritual arts. So I say a psychonaut, I've experienced out-of-body, I've experienced interdimensional understandings before psychedelics, but when it comes to a reliable depth and consistent experience with the divine, I found psychedelics was the best. So I'm a psychonaut. I started off with that. I am a mycologist, an advocate, and I'm your comrade. I consider myself a pedestrian, a cosmopolitan. I'm not interested in being part of anybody but amongst the people. So an advocate, comrade, psychonaut, mycologist. I started, like I say, enjoying the realm, and as most of us who enjoy the space, we want to find out how to access the space when we want, so I've gotten to mycology. So the person responsible for this growth is right there on the picture. Many of us may have heard of him, and if you're lucky enough to know him, that's Kilindi Iyi. And this is my initial teacher, okay? I started working with him in 1999, 98, and this was the familiar scene. And so in the context that I worked with Kilindi, we have to understand that he was not only a mycologist, but he was also one of the world's most respected martial artists. I know people don't understand that, but before MMA, he was proving himself before the cameras were around. And so before he got known in the psychedelics, he was also known as one of the most profound martial artists. And he was regarded as a very high-ranking martial artist. So when I approached him as a student of the martial science, okay? Just to give a little bit of little background. And so at the time, I was rebel rousing, I was organizing. You know, I was organizing, you know, violent, well, let me not say that, civil and non-civil forms of resistance is what I was involved in my late teens. The elders saw this and they said, well, sir, you need training, you need formal training. So they ended up dead or in jail. And so they directed me to train with this gentleman, Baba Kilindi Iyi, who also had a very extensive history in freedom fighting movements. He was known by some of the most profound freedom fighters, whether you talk about Kwame Nkrumah or anybody else. He was known by these people, but he's very underground. And so I learned organizing, I learned community building, I learned culture, and a lot of aspects of who I am from this individual. Mycology was an aspect and extension of this development. And I say that it's important because every Sunday for about 2 years, this was the scene I would come into. And basically, I would come into a scene with a circle of elders. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. They would instruct me to ground and cook rice. That's it. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But every Sunday, I would sit with these elders and grind and cook rice. And I knew it was doing something with a higher point initiation through my martial arts system, but I didn't know. So I just showed up and cooked rice and sat around and packed jars and packed them in the pressure cooker. You know, it was just a constant thing. Didn't know what was going on or why, the reasoning behind it. I didn't realize he was training me for a different purpose. The purpose was the highest, what he called the highest realm of martial engagement, which was engaging those what we call primordial energies that make us up and that also influence us every day in waking reality. And so in this martial system, he taught me that first we have to learn to control our physical body. Then we learn to dominate, or not dominate, but to master dance with those higher, subtle energies. And in fact, those are the energies that actually make the difference. You know, and he said, by the time something manifests on a physical level, it's too late anyway. He said, so you might as well learn how to move on the high martial science. And for those of us who don't know that, most martial arts started from tapping in to the DMT realm. It was all about engaging those higher energies. It wasn't about necessarily kicking your neighbor with a backflip, even though if it came to it, yes. But martial arts was rooted very much in engaging those higher energies, marshaling those forces of protection and defense, not only for self, but for community. And that dealt with both energetic and physical aspects. So I studied as a student with him, both martial arts, combative martial arts, community organizing, and mycology with him for 20 years. First 2 years, like I say, I was cooking rice on Sundays. On Mondays, I would meet him in a study group. Tuesdays, we would train. Wednesdays, rest. Thursdays, train. Friday, study. Saturday, train. Sunday, cook. And this was the routine for about 3 years. Once I learned what I was doing, he finally gave me a jar and allowed me to sprout my own mushrooms, and then he instructed me and a couple of my comrades to sit and watch each other. And so we watched each other on our first journeys. We started off with like 5.5 grams because that's how he did it. He, you know, at the time he says, listen, they're bullshitting. They don't know how to do this stuff, and this is how the ancients did it. And so we followed his instruction. Little do we know, Terrence McKenna would have probably flipped, like, oh, that's past the hero's dose. But we didn't entertain such notions at the time. So anyway, as I began to experience this space, I'm talking about a progression because a lot of people ask me how I got here, and I just have to explain it. It started off being a psychonaut. If you love the DMT realm and what it does for you, you're going to want to access it. If you want to access it, you're going to become a mycologist. If you become a mycologist, of course, you're going to see the beauty of cultivating these things. And if you have a half a heart, hell, you're going to share with community. When you share with community, guess what you're stuck doing? Holding space. Yeah, and then once you start holding space, guess what you start doing? Organizing community. Then once you start organizing community, you advocate for that community. And when you advocate for that community, and so it's an natural unfolding process, and this is basically what happened in my growth. So in this journey of going from psychonaut to advocate, I became a co-founder and spokesperson for Detroit Psychedelic Society. This was founded, like 2017. And we began to organize with local decrim efforts in our state, in particular Ann Arbor and Hazel Park. Big ups. I don't know if Shan is in the audience, but Shan and her mighty team liberated her city. Me and her began to work together. I had another comrade, Julie Barron. She liberated her city, and we just began to liberate cities. And so we began Detroit Psychedelic Society as a hub of Detroit to coordinate with the other cities. And so we began to really rock and roll jail together. We were all respected psychonauts. We all put work in, and we all believed in access, safe access for people. So that work caught the attention of the National Decrim Board. So I was invited to join the National Decrim Board back in 2020. Since then, I think it's been about 11 to 12 cities that have been liberated. And when I say liberated, I mean decrim. More than that, actually. It's a lot more than that, but we've been constantly rolling, and our focus is we flip the cities, we flip the states, we flip the states, we flip the country. Simple as that. Grassroots organizing. Without the influence of big business and lobbyists and corporatists, find a way to use citizen power to create legislative change. So it's been a beautiful work. Beyond that, through all this efforts and growing community, there was a great effort to create a space, a third space, for our psychedelic community. And so I began to work diligently and actually get to a point where I created and founded Per Ankh Entheogenic Church in Detroit, which was founded in last year. So it's been a long journey, and it's a beautiful thing. It's scary, but we continue to push the envelope. So I'm just a snapshot of what I've been up to, if you haven't met me or if you haven't seen me. Now, part of in between this time, studying with Kilindi, anybody who knew Kilindi, he was a on-the-ground person. He wasn't a theorist. If you wanted to know heart surgery, you go to the operation theater and you study it yourself. You don't look at books. And so in this, I was, I guess, what we call apprenticed to study with Kilindi, and we believe in finding out indigenous approaches to these psychedelic plants and finding out how they did it, their sensibilities, and their interactions with them. One of our first theses is we began to go to Europe, go to these huge conferences, mostly white, mostly rich, mostly men, and they began to tell us about sacred indigenous plants. And Kilindi would love standing up and cussing them out, saying, "You don't know what the hell you're talking about." And so they wanted to call a bluff, and so Kilindi called their bluff, and he showed that he had an advanced understanding of stuff. And that opened the door in Europe for America. And a lot of people don't understand the historical context. So in 2016, we hosted the first psychedelic conference in the country. Now, we had mushroom conferences and everything else, but psychedelics in general, it hadn't been done in the country. And so when we went with Kilindi to Europe, engaged in all these conferences, he realized, look, we need to bring this conversation to the United States before these big wigs, these professors, these corporates, and these people who have a tendency to rewrite history, try to rewrite history. So we began the Detroit Psychedelic Conference, and we began to meet beautiful people like Stig, like Shan, like some of the luminaries you've heard from, and build community out. And it was amazing. During that, also, we were tasked with going to study with traditional peoples. And so this was before you had maps and compass and people that can give you grants for this stuff, so you just have to raise your money and go on your own. And so in this, we travel all over the globe. In particular, we put major emphasis on Africa because, of course, they told us African people don't use mushrooms. No, not the largest cattle culture on the planet. Hell no, they don't have mushrooms, whatever. But anyway, we began to challenge that notion by going to the continent and other places in the world and study with traditional peoples. sit with traditional peoples, be initiated in their rites. So through this, I had the pleasure of sitting with the God Dagambi of West Africa, learning their traditional systems, their medicine systems, their approach to spirit and cosmogony. The Wolof people of Senegal, I sat and was initiated. This is where I got my name, my initiated name, Moudou Baqui. I was able to sit with the Mourad people, who were Sufi mystics of Senegal as well, the Mandinka people, the Khoisan of South Africa, the famous, those that speak with the click. Those individuals considered the oldest humans on the planet Earth. And then, of course, the Heder people, who is also considered a very ancient people. So these are just some of the tribes that I sit with, that I share medicine with, that I sat with, and that they shared with me their understanding of these DMT-containing plants and how they enter the realm. Why don't I talk more about it? Because my name is not Gordon Wasson, and I do not exploit indigenous cultures. Okay, so none of this stuff they gave to me in confidence, and it remains in confidence, what they use, why they use it. But trust me, just about every traditional people have sacred inebriants that they use to tap into their ancestral spirit. You don't know, we don't know, because some people still keep secrets. And if you're ever blessed to share space with these people, please honor the tradition. Please don't turn to Gordon Wasson and show up on Time Life magazine, poking your head out of the bushes. Like, I've discovered something new. No, you didn't. Every planet, every culture, every planetary culture has traditions in this thing. It's not exotic, it's not primitive, it's not foreign. It's something that has been crushed under what we call a pharmacratic inquisition. So that's the first thing. That's why I appreciated the presentation yesterday on the Nordic application of psychedelics. You know, it's not just a South American thing. It's a global thing. Also in that work, I work with the University of Miami with the Dr. Denise Vidot, doing some amazing work, because at this time, up to now still, there's very little research on Black and brown communities, on women and psychedelics. So I was blessed to join Dr. Vito in the University of Miami in a couple studies, and there are more going on, produce studies with psychedelics and its interactions with Black and brown communities. We produced one with COVID and comorbidity and its use with psychedelics and how it applied to comorbidity in Black and brown communities. So this is important. We talk about citizen science. We have to be at the table. Marginalized groups have to be at the table, because right now they don't care. As far as they're concerned, their worldview is the worldview, unfortunately. So that's a snapshot of who I is and why I'm up here. I'm just not freestyling. I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. So we can move to the next slide. Now this talks about my journey, and this is something I don't share with a lot of people. Very, very few people. I was telling my friend Jacqueline that this is a crowd that I have a certain amount of respect for. And the reason I say that is because I participate in the cannabis, I participate in the psilocybin community. The cannabis community is beautiful. Everybody believes in the power of cannabis to help and heal and to make our minds and lives better, which is great, and they're motivated by that, right? And so then when I think about the psychedelic community, it's the same motivation, right? But then when we think of the amazing impact it has on people's life, I realize there's two types of people in the psychedelic world. There's profiteers, that's like, oh, this is the next thing. And then there are people who actually give a shit, right? This is like the pre-legalized cannabis crowd, because we all stepping on something that's considered gray. But we all believe enough in people that we say, yo, people need to have access. So what we're dealing with is like truly sterling individuals. It may be some capitalists walking in here, but generally speaking, we're talking about people who are driven by the right reason, which is, a better life, a better example. So why am I saying this? Is because it represents a journey that I've taken through life, and I don't often tell people about where I came from. I talk about my dad being in Rosicrucians, but I was a child of the 80s, born in Detroit, Michigan. Reagan, crack era, yes, for real. And so it wasn't an angel. I didn't come up meditating. I came up on the block, shooting dice, smoking blunts, running from police. I came up with real shit. And so my journey started when I was 16. Okay, I got a call just telling me my brother had just got murdered. Woo. My brother was heavy in the streets. My parents didn't know that. I knew that. And it took my life. It destroyed me. It's like took everything away. can I say that I was innocent? No, I was a young brother following behind him, dealing with the same people, but not as deep. And so when he passed, man, it was like fracturing the whole family. And that was the first time I realized the impact of this place we call drugs and war on drugs. 3 months later, all of a sudden, all my friends started disappearing overnight, 28 of them that I grew up with. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Well, what I didn't know is that there had been a federal RICO warrant put on me and my friends. Unbeknownst to us, they gave us a name. They called us the Ziploc Crew. And we were like, who the fuck are they talking about? And we start seeing our friend's name. We're like, oh, they talking about us. And so, yes, in this sojourn, some of my older friends, we had unfortunately fell into this drug war thing. And we had a sizable organization. Now, I'm not saying I was the cop or anything, but I was affiliated, unfortunately. And what I saw from that perspective wasn't us destroying community. I saw us stabilizing community, us paying gas bills, us doing that, but I didn't understand the sickness we were going through. So when my brother died, it was like smack in the face. I had to come real. You see, while my friends are getting locked up, I'm lucky enough to be in school. And so they said, don't look at him. So I avoided the RICO net. Thanks to my parents, I have been involved in community and political organizing. The elders saw me, and thankfully I had a good enough aptitude where I ended up getting a scholarship to the local university. So now I'm racked with survivor's guilt. I'm like, shit, like all my 25 of my homies, looking at 20 years plus. My brother dead. My family's destroyed. Now, I'm not saying I was Nino Brown, but I wasn't completely innocent. And I had to recognize that, one, I was given a second chance. Two, there was a greater purpose for me. So I could have kept trapping, but I was like, F that, and got right and got real. And that's when I got with Baba Kilindi, okay? So the first thing I learned with Baba Kilindi was our seal, our symbol, and what this real struggle was about. And I hope I'm not getting long-winded, but I'm just sharing with you some context. This is the symbol of our school, Tamarian Institute. Tamarian represents an epic pre-dynastic Egypt. Tamari was an ancient name of the earth. This existed before the priesthoods, before organized governments. This is what we call pre-Younger Dryas civilization. If anybody knows about the Younger Dryas cataclysm that basically reset the world, previous to that, there were human civilizations. And there were expressions of humanizations. There were approaches to technology, approaches to health and everything else. We call it Atlantis. But there's ample evidence from every culture in the world that there was a unified civilization. So the name of the group, our Baba's School's Tamarian Institute, was representing a pre-Dryas epic and some of the teachings that came from that. So our symbol came from that, and y'all probably see it. It's probably familiar. Y'all familiar with the Kaaba. But it's important things that he was teaching me about. The first thing he taught me was the colors. And I say, well, what's the colors about, Baba? He said, the red and white. He say, simple. It's the colors of regeneration. I said, what do you mean? He said, it's the symbol of the fertility blood in the semen. I said, wow. He said, first thing you need to understand is that red is predominant. He said, the driving force of the universe is divine feminine energy. I was like, damn. This little dope boy is just soaking this game up. Like, shit. Then he started talking about the Ka Naba, the personal soul and the unified soul, right? We have a personalized soul, but then we have a collective soul, all right? And that's what represented by the two hinds. And that you being aware of your personal soul, but also that you are part of a collective spirit, the Ka, the Ba. It's like, damn, okay? And he kept breaking it down. He said that symbol in the middle, he said that's the spinal cord, that's the sacred jet. He said this is where the ancient Jedis come. He said this is Jedi training. I said, what? He said that's the jet. He said right now you're starting on the lower vibrational vertebrae. Your goal is to ascend Jacob's ladder or the Jedi column. How do you do that, Baba? He said with the crook and the flail. I said, what do you mean the crook and the flail? He said, well, the flail, the whip, that thing is designed to get your body in shape, to curb your animal primitive instincts, to get those things in place. And then the hook is to hook your spirit from wandering off. In other words, to stay balanced, the way is the middle. So as I continue to learn from him, I started saying, well, what's Per Ankh? And it says the house of resurrection, Ansar, the god of the dead, who's taken from a perpendicular to a vertical through the sacred divine sciences. And I'm like, yo, okay. And so we practicing martial arts. And this is stuff I'm learning over years. And at the end, he finally said, yes, look at the symbol as a whole. I say, I'm looking at it. He said, but you don't see what the symbol is. I say, no, I don't. He said, son, it's a mushroom cap. He said, that's how we access these realms to deal with these energies. And I was like, whoa. And so for the last 20 plus years, I've trained martial arts, spiritual sciences, cultural economics, everything else with him, and learned so much. And as y'all know, in 2020, he left us. Once again, left devastated and lost without my teacher. I didn't know what to do. I don't know what happened between them, but I just know now, on the other side of that journey, I have a beautiful institution called Per Ankh, House of Life, literally in the neighborhood where my friends got locked up. I had the beauty of accepting and bringing all those buddies back to the space after they've done their bid, and now they're partaking transformative process with the sacred plant medicine. So when we talk about a full circle, when we talk about, damn, okay, I get it now. This is part of my struggle, my triumph, my victory. This is who I is, not am, who I is, because I'm still becoming. We are all still becoming. So this is the Per Ankh Institute. It stays literally across the street from where I grew up, right in the middle of the neighborhood where so much is going on. And so now it's a house. Per Ankh means house of life. And so now it serves exactly as that, as a house of life. We're reuniting families. People who used to shoot each other are now hugging it out, dancing. People who used to hate each other are now sharing sacred plant circles. People who used to drop out of school are now learning HPLC lab analysis. So it's a beautiful thing, but this is part of the work, and this is why I wanted to share this, just part of my story, and I thank y'all for just hearing this part, because I don't tell anybody about this. Very few people know about the Ziploc crew. All right, if we can move to the next one. Okay, 2020, moving off that sadness, that pain, dealing with Baba Kilindi's loss, more dedicated than ever to make things work. A small group of us, about 3 of us, decided we were going to liberate Detroit by any means necessary. And so we began to organize for the decriminalization effort. And this is what I'm telling you while we're talking. This wasn't done from gumshoe political work. This was done by pure magic, medicine work. And let me give you the context. It's 5 weeks before this vote went down. We had no money in our account. It's 3 of us on the campaign. The people of the community knew, because for years we doing workshops and education, holding spaces, cultivation class. So the community knew what mushrooms were. It wasn't a thing. But we had no money to print ballots up. We had no volunteers to get signatures. And we wanted this to be a citizen-led initiative so the politicians would put their fingers in it and file it up. And I didn't know what to do. I was crestfallen. I had no other option but my technology. So I went in on like 15 grams, triple darkness. And hey, I just sat with the ancestors. And they said, yo, we got you, man. Don't worry about it. And I said, okay. Upon waking, this is real story. I wish I had more people here that can be like, yeah, it really happened that way. 2 days later, I get a phone call from a former senator in my state. A former senator. I'm like, damn, how you know my name? We've been hearing about you. He said, I have a well-heeled client of mine, and he wants to experience psychedelics, and everyone says that you should be the one to introduce him. I say, okay. So he brings his wife and his business partner, 3 very well-heeled individuals. I facilitate an experience with them. They have an amazing experience. A day and a half later, he calls him back like, what the hell was that? It changed my life, my wife's life, our relationship as business partners. I was like, hey, man, this is the beginning. You know, I would like to share with you. This is what we're trying to do. He said, what can I do to help? I said, well, we have a campaign coming, and we're short about 80 grand. He pulled out his check and said, no problem. All of a sudden, we had the ballots printed, we had the volunteers, and we had the language from the lawyers. We hit the streets. A few weeks later, boom, 62% approval by the people. And this is when I'm talking about magic, when things are bigger than what we think are going on. This is why there's the consequences. Because when we tap into the DMT realms, what we're doing is we're accumulating large amounts of power for good or evil or just stagnation. But we have to have a purpose behind going in. And the veil is, oh, this is some party shit. The other veil is, oh, this is for trauma and hurt, which it is. I don't want to poo-poo that. Or the other veil is, this is the new way we're going to get paid. Or this is the new aphrodisiac. Or this is the new ED pill. Or this is the new, and this is how they try to pimp the sacred. Once again, the people are faced with a decision, right? This isn't the first time we've been faced with this decision. We move to the next slide. We've been faced with this decision several times. Unfortunately, we keep failing. If we look at this, these are examples of sacred plant medicines that were brought to our shores that were exploited and turned out for commercial profit. Up in the corner, that's an advertisement for sugar as a weight loss drug. Now, we know that traditional peoples use the sugar cane as an ancient, traditional, sacred thing. And it was done in small quantities, and there was a ceremony around it, right? It got exploited, and there's sugar in everything. We remember Viceroy's filter smoke. And by the way, their filters had asbestos in them. But it was considered the best thing ever for anxiety. But we know traditional peoples used the good old rustica tobacco to deal with spiritual energies or spiritual emergencies, to deal with lung issues and breathing issues. We knew that this was the #1 treatment for breathing issues by traditional people. So why is it now the #1 destroyer of breathing issues? It's deep questions we ask. We move on, we see Hershey syrup. We talk about cacao. Yeah, before cacao, there was cocoa. And you would serve them in little tiny shots like this, and you would sit around with the elder, and you would take these shots, and it will open you up. But, you know, they decided, how can we stretch this chocolate and make it this very, very watered down and spread it over everything so it no longer has any physical effects? Does this sound familiar? Yeah. We move on. We talk about heroin, which was created by Bayer as a painkiller, still destroying communities. Manifestation of Starbucks through coffee. Look at here. We have the new health and wellness lifelong resolution, marijuana pills. Yay, right? Once again, we all know this is a sacred plant used by indigenous people to tap into higher states of consciousness so they can affect their betterment and their surroundings and their village. Let's just watch the pattern. We have Coca-Cola. We know the history behind Coca-Cola. So what I'm saying is we've seen this show before, right? And we have a decision to make. Some of us, we go commercial. Some of us keep it traditional. What I'm saying is deeper than a pocketbook. What we're dealing with is primordial energies that shape our reality. Next slide, please. This is what America. This is America. They've taken all these sacred plants and they've created inebriants out of them. And the ancients, the elders told me to say, that which heals you will kill you if you exploit it. That tobacco that was going to heal you, that plant spirit, that ka that we talk about, that spirit, yes, there's a collective spirit, and when you piss it off, it begins to attack you. Sugar, marijuana, cocaine, cacao, opium, tobacco, cola, all these things. Even fermented beer, which was one time was a medicine and a sacred thing, has been pimped out. Hell, you can't even find fermented beer anymore. Thanks to the 1648, or 15, I don't know, I messed the date up, but the laws of beer purity of Germany that says you can no longer make beer with things such as ayahuasca or henbane. You must only use hops. Why? Because hops has a high estrogen count, and it makes men docile and less prone to have children and lazy. Man, you see how they manipulate the science? All the way back 500 years ago, they figured we're going to put hops in here and it's going to make the people docile. That's deep. No more mandrake, no more mushrooms, no. Hops only. That's deep, right? Pharmacratic inquisition. Let's move to the next slide, please. First, they came for the chronically ill, and I said nothing because I was hoping they might approve psychedelic therapy. That's what's going on now. And that's the decision we have to make. Many of us in this room engage in this world on all levels, from grassroots to engaging in them capitalist clowns. So sometimes you find yourself in maps in Colorado dealing with the plastic world. And then you had these deep discussions, right? Like, yo, what the fuck's going on with Palestine? Yo, what the fuck's going on with the social service? Yo, what? Shh. We're so close to getting it legalized. We don't want to. And so this is a problem, right? Because in this space, we're supposed to be peace and love. We're not supposed to be burning shit down. Because if we are, guess what's going to happen? Prohibition. So everybody's quiet. So then when we look at the main lobby that's controlling the psychedelic conversation, yes, it's Elon Musk and them homies. It's RFK and them. There's a huge project going on right now in Israel. How do you dope up your soldiers so they can kill without conscience, goddammit? It's going on. And so at a certain point, we have to make a decision because the people that control this thing understand it is bigger than profit. It's talking about the human spirit. It's talking about your right to your consciousness. And already they're like, well, we can make a psilocybin and don't get you high. Who the fuck needs to get high? You can just, see, so we have to be careful about this because as this discussion comes on, they're gonna do the same thing. When I started in the 90s, if you would have said microdose, they would have laughed your ass out the room. What the hell are you talking about? And then when it became mainstream, you know what the microdose was in the 2000s? 0.3. Now it's 0.005. Because who needs the high when you can get the benefits, right? Who needs to tap in the spirit? You just need to be anesthetized to deal with this political shit we on. Don't tap into something that's going to expand your mind and have you thinking of alternative approaches to reality. We have to understand this. Because if I could take a $10 gram of mushrooms and make 80 off of it, I could take that 10 grams and make 20 hits and sell them for $20 each. The goal isn't necessarily human development and evolution. The goal is profiting. The goal is how can I stretch this shit so thin and spread it on everything. So we say now, your new Frosted Flakes, psilocybin infused for better grades. This is what's going on. And we are tempted, I know, because sometimes when we grassroots organizers, man, they get tight. It's like, sheesh, I need that money. And you see them little plastic bros making all of this money, and you're like, what could I do with community if I made $100,000 a month? What could I do, right? So the temptation is real, but what's also real is our obligation to be creative organizers. So we have to find ways to create, to deal with those issues of economy, and at the same time maintain that ethical stance and stand on what we believe is true and not sell out. These are the consequences of consciousness. It's not just, oh, I love myself, I'm wonderful, and I won't die. Now you have to start thinking outside of yourself. And these are the critical discussions we need to have with people, with communities when we engage them in this work. Why are you here? Do you know what this shit about? Are you really ready to start some shit? Because too many people come in looking for what? Painkillers, right? Oh, I've been through some horrible shit, man. 2 divorces and my dog died. I need something to... But then you don't tell them, like, you know you're not going to be the same anymore, right? You know you're going to see how shit really is, right? And it's important we tell people that so that they understand what happens, because I'm sure for most of us out here that's been organizing community, you got with that one individual, you gave them that experience, and they came out even worse than they started. It's like, damn, I created an asshole. You know? Because part of that means is orientation, political, social, cultural orientation beforehand. It's not just, hey, dude, you want a 3.5 here, fuck it. Call me when you're finished. This is the work. And it's not an easy solution, but it takes creative approaches, it takes community, it takes solutions to do it. But right now, this is the term. Everybody's quiet because we're this close to psychedelic therapy. But at what cost? You know what I'm saying? Next slide, please. Y'all are familiar with this. Please don't be offended by the symbol. If you are, you're not very educated, so allow me to do so. That symbol is a symbol of peace that's been bastardized. So please don't get offended. I do not support that shit. I support the original expression of that symbol. And what this map represents is yugas or cycles. And this isn't just something that's understood in traditional Hindu or Indian philosophy. This is something that's understood by every major indigenous culture, every human culture on the planet Earth. You have what you call temporal cycles, and then you have great cycles. And the wise people of the world would teach through philosophy about both cycles. Of course, we're oriented toward the temporal cycle, which was created by commercialism, because, 200 years ago, there wasn't no such thing as 5 o'clock. That was created to make sure that the ships came on time, the clock, the 24 hour. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. Orientation with time was always something that our people did. That's why most cultures were stargazers, because they understood that there was many cycles that we lived during. Daily cycle, hourly cycle, cycles a minute. This is the swirling of the durable serpent, right? There's cycles within cycles of time, but outside of our temporal understanding of a year, a decade, a century, there are even larger cycles. And that understanding those cycles helped tribes, helped groups understand where they were at. There were entire peoples who would move based on the stars. Okay, it's time for us to move 1,000 miles east. Why? Because the stars said so. Not because it's a better economy. No, it's because and so they understood that we were moving in procession to a greater expression. Okay, when we talk about reincarnation and things, we have to understand that we are moving as a collective to a better expression, to a godliness. And the idea of this approach of psychedelics is what we call hypnosis. Okay, and it's a heavy concept, but basically hypnosis is becoming the gods through studying them. It's through meditating on those aspects of divinity so well that you begin to emulate those things. And so in this trail or this goal or this long calendar toward this hypnosis state, there are trials and tribulations. They say the yugas, right? Kali Yuga, this is when materialism reigns and all of these things. But it's important we understand that these cycles are within us too. And that this cycle of the yugas go through the year, go through the decade, and go through and once we understand what time it is, things begin to align better. It's just like a dance. If you're off rhythm, hell yeah, you're stepping on toes and you don't feel comfortable. So part of this work is learning how to become more in sync with the times and not be disturbed or distracted by the news and CNN, but understanding there's a greater cycle in place. And what's our role in that cycle? How do we take advantage of that cycle? So right now in this cycle, we are in a massive tsunami of information, tsunami of empowerment, tsunami of humans expanding their knowledge, a tsunami of accessibility, whereas we talk about the word citizen science more than ever. Citizens can get in there and do their thing. There are people who can teach you how to do gene transfer for $300 online. They'll send you a kit, There's DNA sequencing going on. There's 3D printing. There's mycology. So all of these things are becoming online, and this is a very pivotal point because, once again, it's a splitting point. Those of us that are trying to move for the uplift, our biggest obligation is to utilize these technologies, these understandings to be world builders. I heard somebody like, oh, this AI is the AI is here. Now you're either gonna build an engine to serve your community or you're gonna have an engine that your community serves. We cannot run from this technology. You have 3D technology, you have solar technology, you have advanced agriculture technology, you have aquaponics, you have hydroponics. These are technologies that can create the world we're looking for, but we have to be engaged in it, and we cannot be afraid of it. And these are some of the consequences. What am I talking about? Sometimes when I work with individuals that start tapping in, they either have their kundalini ascending already, and this is something to remember, or their kundalini is descended. So you either have an individual who's already in the ethers, it's like peace and love, and I feel your aura, which is dope. But then when you work with them, that means I need to descend your kundalini because you need to be functional. Hell, you need to know how to work a 3D printer as well as astrology cards. What are you talking about? Right? And then we'll meet people whose kundalini are base. who needs ascension. And those are individuals who are lost, who are losing their religion, who are confused with the world, who are pissed with the political space. And that's when and they're very attached to the material and money. And so you aid them in ascending their kundalini. But this is the science that we have to understand when we engage community. Either somebody's coming to you and they need to be grounded or they need to be elevated. But the ultimate goal is balance, and that's what goes on with all of us. And these are some of, once again, the consequences of consciousness. Why is that important? Because in this work, in this space, you're going to see a lot of infighting. You'll be like, man, I thought we were the mushroom people. Why the fuck are we fighting? Those are the issues we need to be aware of. You have somebody who has an ascended kundalini who doesn't understand the importance of fucking saving money. And then you have somebody who understands the importance of money but don't understand the importance of community. And then you get this clash. Both are correct. Both need balance. And so as we move forward in our community organizing, we have to understand oftentimes these are the places of clashing. Individuals whose kundalinis are rising up, who see a greater ideal, individuals who's rising down, who see a practical reality. And it's up to us as people who enter this realm to learn to find equilibrium with it. Because we still have to have questions about economy. Are we capitalist or are we socialist? Do we do a share all economy, co-op economy, or do we do traditional business? These are things we have to decide as cultural creators. This is the hard work. So this is the yuga that's represented. Massive information, massive access, but at the same time, massive confusion, massive isolation, massive loneliness. And those of us that are cultural creators, we have to address that. How do we address loneliness? By creating third spaces where people can gather without any agenda. How do we address questions of economy? You know, co-op, socialist model, capitalist model, we have to do this. We have to engage in it, even though it's icky talk and it's considered very lowbrow for those of us that's tapped into the higher realm. We have to deal with politics. Yeah, it's scary. When I started doing the organizing for the Proposal E, I hated it. I hated getting on cameras and sitting with senators and shaking babies and kissing hands. I said it backwards, kissing hands and shaking babies. No, shaking hands and kissing babies. Anyway, y'all know how politics works, but I felt icky. You know what I'm saying? And so part of this work is for those of us that are tapped in the spirit is to become comfortable becoming uncomfortable. Yes, you have to get signatures. Yes, you have to organize community things. Yes, you have to deal with mundane things like city council meetings and who's going to be your next senator, even though that's not considered real. And for those people who are in that world, don't think that that's the only thing. Most important is your spirit, your heart, your afterlife. And so part of this is just understanding the consequence of consciousness because we find these contradictions going there within us. And I'm just sharing what I've learned to help us kind of navigate better, come together, and thrive better as community. Can we hit the next slide? This is a piece from a very ancient text, the Kemet, that dealt with utilizing sacred plant technologies. This is one of the oldest initiation books ever, you know. But this is an important line that I want to share because this kind of speaks to the gist. And I know I'm going to wrap it up shortly. But it says, I have made my way by the tree of life. I have brought myself to silence. Now I've entered into the sacred mysteries. And standing behind the throne on the day, driving back disasters and sail forth the right and truth. In other words, driving back disasters. When you tap into this realm, part of what you're doing is creating the proper energies for the people around you and the people that you love. That means that you have to be right inside of yourself, which means that you have to take care of yourself because you are representing a community. And those of you that are just starting in this, I'm going to give you a heads up. Yes, you will be representing community soon. If you care about people and you want to share with people, there are going to be people who are going to come to you for help, and you have to be willing to accept them. And if you impact them, guess what? Other people are coming. But that doesn't make you the center of the storm. That just makes you a little further down the trail. And so like Stig will tell you, there are no experts in this thing. There are those of us with a little more experience, but we're all learning. We're all peers. We're all brothers and sisters. Next slide, please. This is what it's based on. I don't know if you heard this. I hope it plays right. But this is a very important quote from Dick Gregory. I love to share this with people. Can we try to play it? Hopefully it comes out. No, it didn't come through. But Baba Dick Gregory, he was a friend of Kilindi. I had him been. But one of the things he often said, he had this quote about magic glasses, which talked about an expanding understanding of reality. He says that he said the thing about magic glasses, there are 3 rules. Ooh. He say, first, once you put them on, you can't take them off. It's important you let people know you're not going to be the same after this. Number 2, you can't make other people see what you can see. In other words, you're going to have realities that other people just won't be able to see. And you just have to learn how to deal with that and articulate. And that's where culture and art comes in. And then the 3rd rule is that you can't force people to put them on. You can't make somebody put on the magic glasses. So there are going to be people who choose to stay, let's just say, comfortable. And that's okay because they're still part of our community. But we have to be ready to receive them when they get there. Okay? Next slide. Or, I don't know. Can we get it? This is a beautiful thing. I started a group called Hood Noetics, which is designed for people in the hood. Noetics is the science of sacred spiritual science applied to real life. Like, okay, you practice telepathy, how do you use it? You practice remote viewing, how do you use it? Noetics is applied spirituality. And this talks about a noetic loop of how we build community, and we're almost done, but it's important we understand how this thing flows. Just so we start off right very in the center, what we call a noetic experience. That's usually like your first 5-gram trip or whatever substance you choose. And then you spiral, you expand your understanding of who you are and who and where you are. And as you go down, this is the down part. This is the exploration. This is when your Kundalini descends. You start to find out who is this child and his parents and his family community I became. And through this understanding, you have a choice. Okay? You either continuously seek, right? Or you find a practice. And this is where so many of our people get lost. This is what the cute term of integration is about. Did you do post-integration? Did you find a practice, damn it? So it's not just a 30-minute conversation behind a 5-gram trip. It's let's find a practice for you, whether it's Tai Chi, it's meditation, it's poetry, art. We need to find a practice for you to stay centered in this divine reality. So those of us who are practitioners, let's not do the cheap stuff and be like, integration's a 30-minute talk and you pay $50 for it. Let's find a practice for the people that helps them maintain their growth. So we move on and we find a practice, but then we have another choice, okay? Practice becomes end rather than the means. And we see people who do this. They'll go into this nominal space. They'll find something great. They'll say, oh, my God, I've learned how to do Reiki. And now I'm a Reiki practitioner, and that's my business. That's cool, but that's not the goal. Yes, make money, do whatever you do with your Reiki practice, but that's not the stop. So that's where it becomes an end comes a mean. And as a worker, as a practitioner, as a leader, as people that come to, it's your job to keep pushing. Okay, I'm glad you're a Reiki practitioner. I hope you just grow, but there's still more work to do. And so we continue up that spiral and you become life as a practice. Because oftentimes you're that Reiki practitioner, have you learned to extend beyond yourself? Have you learned to show up at the community kitchen and give free Reiki? Or are you still charging? So this is when you push people to live outside of themselves. Then they live outside of themselves and suddenly they become this thing from I to we. They begin to move from that singular identification to a group identification. I'm not talking about groupthink or brainwashing. I'm talking about understanding that you and me, us, are reflected in you, me, us. So if I do good, you get what I'm saying? It's not about helping people to be the best they can be. It's about you being the best you can be for other people. Stop picking boogers out of other people's nose. Clean your own nose. So we go from I to we. How do I contribute to we? Why can I become the best person I can be for we? Not how can they come on time better, or how can they, pull their pants up? No, how can I become better for the we? And it's what we call a divine selfishness, because our orientation is, no, we have to serve the underdeveloped. We have to look back as if we're so far ahead, give back. It's this sick mentality, right? But it's really the opposite. If you want to help people, help your damn self, become the best you can be to serve people. We move on, and that's when you become living deeply, right? Salute to Stig. Salute to the family, right? Because this is what it's what we written to sing in real time. He could have just sat there and said, yo, I got the best species ever. I'm going to top my colleges. Yo, holla at me. But he moved beyond that. The family moved beyond that and said, yo, this is community. This is me from I to we. Okay? So you approach the bro, he like, yo, I'm no gatekeeping here. What you need? This is the noetic loop. We move on to living deeply, which is what we're doing now. And then we bring it to a larger community. That means each of us can learn from this model and take it to our own communities. This is the noetic loop. And then you see collective transformation. The elders used to call it alchemy. This is a sexy little graph we can use for the modern times. But this is what we call community alchemy. And it starts from the internal process. Okay, last slide. Please stay in touch. We are a community. Detroit is a community. We're part of the Midwest family. I know there's other regions beside the Midwest here, but we are part of a growing family. Let's stay in touch. We do a lot of activities, workshops, classes, gatherings, festivals, conferences. We just creating reasons for community to come together. Just give us a reason. Make a reason. I don't care. Whole idea is stay in touch. Let's begin to build this mycelial net. Okay, I serve as a resource. We serve as a resource. We serve as a support network. We serve as a collective force for good, ideally. And we serve to be accountable. In other words, stay in touch. So if you see me on some bullshit, Moudou, you on some bullshit. Yeah, because none of us is above any of us, right? And part of this work moving forward for us to remain sacred is to be accountable to each other, because all they need is another scandal. All they need is another fucking mushroom pimp, psychedelic shaman, and it's going to destroy and implicate all of us. So this is also for me to be accountable for you, all right? And with that, I'll just say peace. I'm your brother, Baba Moudou. Thank you for having me.